Hey everybody, I've got something to say. I was a formerly celebrated National Human Rights Awarded author and Human Rights Awarded advocate around the topic of holistic wellness and mental illness, or mental skillness. And I had spoken publicly on the recovery road and my own self-reflexive journey and holistic health at local, state, federal and international levels. And I worked in public roles as an illustrator for both the Age and the Herald Scum. Later in life, I had many births and redeaths, but many moves, partners, lovers, and then later in life, one of my fiancés was with the Australian Secret Intelligence Agency or Office. There actually was a movement to destroy me. I had to reverse engineer that. Just recently I found out my Freedom of Information request from the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet had thousands of matches of data in it, which the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner said they needed more time to unpack it because my request was, quote, too voluminous and complex. That would obviously be the case since I'd been a human rights awarded advocate and artist and a person with a public profile, and additionally later in life had found myself the subject of scapegoating and being a political prisoner. That decision was reviewed by the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, and the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet had reported back to them. That is, that the thousands strong entries to do with my identity or former identity, Richard William Mclean, does not exist. That was an allegorical threat, and the system, that's what they want, and framed by a very recent incarceration in a psychiatric ward that was dressed up as a paranoid mental illness, delusions of persecution, when in fact the systemic abuse and neglect prior to that, years before, had literally driven me to suicide in a public hospital, and that that was the result of systemic oppression over my life and actions by silent key political stakeholders that are protecting a few things. That's money, privilege, power, and their political position. The whole world has forsaken me, but that's fine. I'm not worried. I was left to die after I actually did suffer what was identified as a fatal injury in hospital in February of 2021. In that, the Freedom of Information says it was a fatal injury and a lethal attempt, and I was accidentally found with no observable pulse, having bled out, and avoided a certain death that would have been blamed, of course, on mental illness and drugs. There you go. So after that, I was rejected by everyone, systemically oppressed again, forsaken and damned to hell in ever so more profound ways. And the government supported me in to live in abject poverty for over 18 months until now. that's just not a bad... Well, and it took 10 months for them to see me for a second psychiatric appointment. Not that I needed it, but that's more than a bad public mental health system. That's one in which I was scapegoated and systemically oppressed, gaslighted and damned. And that I alone was left to fight for my own dignity and my very human worth on the precipice of existing. The evidence contained in this is extremely important because it exposes a wide-bearing systemic hypocrisy and a vile systemic victimisation so broad and thorough, opposing and demonising and framing a single victim and scapegoating me, a person I think who has or had such goodwill. I mean, the whole story is absolutely abhorrent, and I think you'll all be shocked. I'll go on a sec. So this movement that left me at the behest of my own frailty, an intelligently designed methodology by political stakeholders with very powerful positions to effectively isolate and render me a vagrant, of which I am now. They left me with a very predictable suicide, and in doing so, they all really hoped, I guess, that they would relieve a systemic oppression of someone, me, who was seen as a burden to people in positions of political prowess and who were public servants, who were bound by the Charter of Human Rights of People with a Disability, ratified by the very same government in 2008, and those servants acted in opposition and outside of all dignity. And it's a consciously organised nepotism that wealthy bureaucrats and government employees could never cross the floor to be on Dr. Rich Mclean's side, because they're paid by the government to silence it like sheeple, paid to toe the party line, to oppress me and silence me, and to hold me to ransom, and to exploit me, to identify, vilify, victimise, maim, blame and shame me. I just want to quicken the pace a bit now. This isn't in any chronological order, but I found myself, after my former partner and I parted ways amicably, that I'd had issues with a GP. Now, as an ethical person and person doing a PhD and a doctorate, his lawyer was Mr. Ball of Ball and Partners. Now, I didn't know this until after, years later, when I tried to commit suicide, that he had internally utilised libel and slander to frame me to government agencies, including APRA, NHPAPC, the police, IBAC, the Victorian Inspectorate and the Ombudsman, as a some kind of evil extortionist. And this very nature of him doing this, that in effect set me up to fail with a quest for just a simple acknowledgement that a tragedy had happened, it constituted a microcosm of a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. That is exactly what it is. Mr. Ball is single-handedly responsible for aiding and abetting my death and setting me up to fail. And government agencies and bureaucrats and public figures, public officials who were supposed to act within the Charter of Human Rights absolutely didn't, and they all watched and waited and watched me burn. Now, it's a horrific story, and one that exposes the frailty of how weak-minded humans are, basically. Anyway, yeah, I'll go on a sec. Yeah, so I guess I had in my early life, where I was a public illustrator at the age, and before that, the Herald Sun. I wrote the book on my experience with a kind of discordant period of my life, and I think it was brave and courageous, a public narrative of my very intimate life, and now later on in life, because people had issues with me, it acted as fuel for a movement to exploit me. Not only as an extortionist, but an evil genius, a madman, a rapist, a pedophile, a dogfucker, worse. You get the general gist. The very left side of it's not just even that they innocuously ignored me, it's that they pointedly attacked me, and they did it systemically and by silence, and attacked me in stigma and shame and prejudice, and exploited any vulnerability that I had. And in addition to that, they pointedly took aim at me, and it's a horrible story. And to that, I had a very clearly, intelligently designed, immaculate financial, personal, professional ruin. It was elaborately planned and set me up to fail with a malicious and conscious foresight via proxy attacks of government agencies, systemic organisations, and they robbed me of prosperity. And as you can see, I'm sitting in my squat. It destroyed not only what I might have had, but jobs I've had in the past, places that I'd go in the future. It took my human value, it took my dignity, and my very worth as a sentient human being. I've begged for food, I was rejected healthcare, human value, dignity, and the very worth that every sentience deserves. And that after I'd already survived, that was because after I'd already survived a fatal suicide attempt, that the systemic oppression and scapegoating had caused the causation of, and then further I was dumped again. So I'm kind of trapped in this narcissistic abuse and neglect so thorough in its gaslighting, I did question the very own validity of my life. Now, killhim.info was launched after I'd survived and then been rejected again, to publicly expose the horror of my existence of being heinously identified, vilified and victimised by what seemed to be an entire country, rendering me an innocuous and loud but pointless vagrant in a society that has free speech and whistleblower protections, and it's supposedly a democracy, and it supposedly is a signature to the Charter of Human Rights, which would say that I deserve equal access to the law and access to litigation. As it stands, I barely have access to food. For a whole of 18 months, I've survived on my grateful bursary of the DSP of about $1,400 a month, and my very rent here is $1,646 a month. So actually, for 18 months, I've lived in absolute detriment, which has been an adventure, I'll tell you. Hold on a sec. I'll quicken the pace a bit now. I found after giving for myself for so long in art, in music, in writing, in my authenticity, in my very intimate worlds, was the opposite of a malicious systemic coldness and that exploited me and identified and prejudiced me. And it was universal, and it saturated my life with detriment throughout, in every aspect of my life, across my life, from financial relationships, my health, food supply, withholding of property and money, and the destruction of my very dignity and worth by making me jump through hoops of failure set up by key political stakeholders, filthy rich lawyers and politicians. Fail again and again without even knowing this was the case, and I actually foolishly believed in an ethical outcome, or that there was actual justice for events that needed atonement and for which there is undeniable evidence. Nothing could have been further than the truth. As an authentic young person, I knew what I was, and that I was different to the sheeple and the people who consciously choose ignorance, but I was the queen of denial. I was absolutely self-reflexive in my merit, in my expressions in early adulthood, and its hardness, and also its suffering. I guess I'm a light worker and a truth seeker, and I'm a colourful and authentic person. You may not be able to handle my directness. That's not my issue. I try and temper it. It's the other person's. The opposite side to that is the political pawns of government, the sheeple, grey, humorless public servants with no courage, no individualism, and clearly weak in terms of how they can apply critical thought and individualism to ethical issues of humanity and dignity that come before them by the constituents they're supposed to represent. This is not modern day China, but from where I stand, it may well be. And I'm a fourth generation Antipodean, non-Indigenous with the privilege of education, being white, healthcare, and the majority of my needs met in a warless zone. Yeah. So yeah, early on in life, I already knew I was going to be a war with the sheeple, the beige brigade. Jimi Hendrix once dedicated a song in a recording I have that I love, and he said it's to people fighting wars, but not only wars of places, but wars within themselves, not necessarily places of physical reality. I love that. Early in the juncture and schism between my authentic, multi-dimensional world I knew I was and had existed in, I knew it was going to be fraught with difficulty. As a society had kind of lobotomized everyone around me via fear and control of being ruled by money and going, and for them to all go the extra mile just to fit in. It never made sense to me. They exhibited, and still do, the willful choice of ignorance over preferential knowledge and a reality they all know exists right before their eyes, but they can't acknowledge it. It means their minds have to categorise what is taboo or not on the cards or not spoken about for them. A lot of the time, the consciously designed vagrancy, which everyone backs for me, is dressed up as illness. But it's actually not. It's an ill society. So I guess I was fighting for many years without a soul in the world to back me. I spoke for myself. I followed protocol in my complaints in the most profoundly gullible of ways, holding hope for traction and justice. Yeah, as it had always been, I'd been set up to fail ahead of time every time. It did not kill me. Well, it could have killed me a few times, but the last time, I just wanted to say that at the time of this recording, I'm alive. And currently, as of 6th of the 7th, 2022, this being is here. But the way it is, I've got no human value. I've got no worth. I've got no dignity. I'm exploited. I'm arbitrarily denied life. What do you think people think is going to happen next with a incarceration unit who want to medicate me and a home that I just can't afford, and a brain detriment from an injury I can't get an atonement for? I'm being systemically tortured by the government. I've had property withheld from me and my finances. My human rights are in shattered pieces. My access to the law is utterly destroyed. my agency to engage any litigation is irrevocably removed, and my voice has absolutely been silenced. Although I like to sit in a bit of a gas bag to the computer sometimes. I'm squatting, and I have been since after my death, from when I was rejected. I don't really have enough food a lot of the time. Sometimes I get malnourished. I barely have healthcare, and the healthcare that is just a very academic kind of way of looking at mental illness that actually re-traumatizes people who have already been traumatized. I've lost every person in my life, but I've gained my freedom and my rebirth, and barely got a friend, but I'm friends with myself and the divine. And I'm assuming my role as this transformational expert, and I'll explain in a minute. I've been detained, I've been kept in a dark room, secluded and alone. I've suffered over my life utterly millions and millions and millions of dollars in detriment. And that is the money I'm going to put towards a trust fund, which is going to help the most marginalised and voiceless people in the country. And to that, I'm only going to keep enough for a pretty basic life. I haven't got children. There's no reason for me to have anything physical in the world, especially framed by late-stage capitalism and the already post-apocalyptic insect apocalypse of the late-stage Anthropocene. So, additionally to that, I've suffered police brutality, systemic torture, denied value, dignity, worth. I've been further oppressed. I can't believe... Anyway, it's just cosmic. I was robbed of the future I thought I wanted. Thanks for that. I was catastrophically character assassinated. But the ego death is an absolute blessing. And abhorrently designed via vile victimisation, a scapegoat. The world has indeed, first in a somewhat biblical, allegorical way, crucified me, and then I survived and resurrected only to suffer another death and then be forsaken. Quite an incredible story. Of my people, friends and family and society, and systemic cowardly individuals that are a grey mass of normalcy, unless they know it is a delusion, I guess I'm just further ostracised and neglected, and such a damned reputation, so watertight, that I've literally had to beg people to object to my own death. And not one person thought that was an issue, which really blew my head apart. I've not seen any evidence of so much as a pen being lifted in the defence of my life, or indeed the accidental discovery of me in which mental illness and drugs would have been blamed. Then I suffered the malicious design of financial, emotional, reputational detriment again as a squatting vagrant, only now with probable acquired brain injury, and in addition, I've got cancer. But we're all going to die. I'm not worried about dying. Just hope it's not before the dog. She's on the bed. I'm now probably the most fundamentally ignored personality, as in once was a little bit famous for my public advocacy role, and now infamous political prisoner and financial refugee in the most notable person in Australian political history in the past. Well, I don't know if that's just an existential thing of me, but I'm right up to the office of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and every systemic organisation under that is fallen. So what are we all waiting for? I have no home. I can't report crime to authorities. I can't be a whistleblower. I can't access litigation. The men in white coats are coming to take me away. This is it. For the timely spirit, for the time my spirit has a human monkey existence before I can go home, and home's here as well, the God self, hopefully not before I look after my dog, I need basic things to keep the physical, rational body alive and going in order to serve others. That is why I'm sending this message to the Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, who I've had the pleasure of meeting, and also to Bill Shorten, the NDIA Minister, for their witnessing of this, and why I am asking them in at least a way that starts the process, because once one domino goes over the lot do, that this detriment be repaid, because all I want really is a life free from oppression with basic needs met. And I don't think anyone in the world would disagree that this systemic detriment has occurred, especially with the evidence that I've presented here on killhim.info. Yeah, so I'm just going to keep what I need for a basic life with my dogs, some drugs and booze, and a harem of lovers. I run a non-for-profit charity and invest the money so that the allegorical transformation expert my shaman said I will become will come to fruition. With the suffering and detriment of my life, the exchanging of currencies of such a facetious and flat thing as money into love, hope, goodwill, and meaning is all that I can do with my life, and it's possible for me to do rationally and physically in this world, and that's my dying wish, that money go to all those people and it be put into a trust fund. That's my dying wish, and I guess those people that come along the journey with me, you're more than welcome. But ultimately, I've been forsaken. It's a great shame, but you know, I could have never anticipated this happening, and yeah, it's been a bit. Well, at least it hasn't been boring, you know.